This week in the astrology, we have a lot of intense energy, and that's because we start the week off with the full moon in Scorpio. As well, we're going to be having Mercury make a square to Pluto. We will have Venus finally leaving shadow, and the whole Venus retrograde phase that we've been dealing with since the beginning of the year is finally over. By the end of the week, we will also be having the sun conjoining Uranus, which is going to be great for breakthroughs and liberation and feeling just free in general. But on the same day, we have Mercury squaring Mars, and so there's going to be some sort of verbal conflict that we go through by the end of the week. So there's a lot to unpack in this week, so let's go ahead and get started talking about it. Welcome back to The Astrology Report. My name is Cam White. If you don't know me already, I'm a professional astrologer, and you know what my job is to do. It is to tell you what is going on in the astrology and let you know how to best use it to your advantage and get the most out of it. This week, we are talking about May 12th through May 18th of 2025. I'm very excited you guys can be here with me this week because I am really looking forward to this week's astrology. So we start Monday off with the full moon in Scorpio as our first highlight. After the full moon, later on in the evening, the moon is then going to make an opposition to Uranus. It's then going to make a trine to Saturn, and we have our second highlight of the day that happens a little bit later in the evening, and that's Mercury making a square to Pluto. I am really excited to talk about this full moon in Scorpio, though, because the whole theme of the full moon in Scorpio is letting things die, killing it all. And why is that? The zodiac signs get their meaning from the seasons, and it is Taurus season. Everything is blooming and blossoming, and this is the time to cut out the dead weeds. To literally, like when you think about planting a flower bed or a garden, this is the time to till up the soil and get rid of all of the dead things that lasted over the winter, and for things to be refreshed again. But it takes death in order to produce life. Like when it comes to like energy can't be created or destroyed, right? It can only be like transferred. And so when you think of death, you know, in Western society, we have such a negative view on death. And if you've ever experienced a lot of death in your life, you can actually understand how beautiful of a thing it is and how natural it is for humans to go through, and how honestly, like in a weird way, like honorable it is. But this full moon in Scorpio is asking you to highlight the things that are underneath the surface. Scorpio is about the things that are hidden, the things that are dark, the things that are underground. And with the full moon, the moon is about highlighting the things that are hidden. Because think about what the moon does. The moon is a luminary, and it lights up the night. It lights up the dark. It's about our intuition. It's about our feelings. It's about things that are close to us. And it's happening in Scorpio. The full moon is happening in Scorpio. Now the moon is fallen in Scorpio, which means, again, if the moon is about like emotions and nurturing and being taken care of, and Scorpio is about like death and hostility, the moon wouldn't like to be there, right? But I think what's really important about this full moon is this is the time to illuminate the uncomfortable things that we don't want to look at. And this is such a fun time because for me, I really just like intense astrology. I'd rather have it be meaningful and in depth rather than just passive and laissez-faire. And this full moon on Monday, I really want you to look at your birth chart. What house does Scorpio rule? And what needs to be uncovered in this area? What needs to be purged from this area? This full moon, in my opinion, is such an excellent time to just clean out and clear out the bullshit that you have held on for a long time. And I think it's an excellent way to start the week. Now, the moon will then go opposite Uranus and then trine Saturn after all of this. So when the moon does go opposite Uranus, the way I was thinking about this was like, it's like you're cleaning out your house, and then lo and behold, there's a skeleton in your closet you didn't know was there before. So I will say with caution that when you do some of this deeper purging, you might discover some things that you didn't know were there. This is what's really fun about life. When you actually let yourself get into your emotions, you can end up kind of discovering like, oh, I was holding on to this, situation I didn't know I was holding on to. I've talked a lot about some of the personal development courses I took, like a decade ago. And in one of them, we did this like guided meditation thing. And in that guided meditation, it was pretty much like it was about discovering what you're holding on to subconsciously. And at the time I was like, I'm not holding on to anything. And through that meditation, I ended up discovering I was holding on to like my grandfather's death, and I had a lot of guilt around it. And it was this huge breakthrough for me. And it really shook me up. Like I was like shaking after it. And it was just one of those things where if I hadn't allowed myself to go that deep, I would have never discovered that I was holding on to so much guilt about that situation. And being able to connect those dots was liberating in and of itself. So I think this full moon plus the moon going opposite Uranus really speaks to that. But then the moon makes a trine to Saturn, where it's kind of like, okay, again, Saturn's at the last degrees of Pisces here. We're about to have Saturn going into Aries. Saturn in Aries video is coming out this week. So if you're not subscribed already, make sure you subscribe to see that video. But the moon makes this trine to Saturn where it's about, like, okay, you went through this emotionally turbulent time, like that full moon, right? Now it's time to kind of like allow yourself to be a little bit more in control of your emotions, feel like you can have some discipline and some control over it. But then the other highlight we have on Monday is Mercury making a square to Pluto. And the thing that I find really funny about this is I think the two, well, I shouldn't say, all of the fixed signs are incredibly stubborn. And if Mercury is about the way that we think and the way that we're speaking and communicating, it's in this fixed sign. Like, we're going to be really stubborn for the next couple weeks. Now, luckily, Mercury flies through Taurus, and I think this is a really excellent time to just kind of like make sure all of your systems and your plans are going smoothly, and you can keep them, fixed which is again the whole point of Mercury being in Taurus, is like make sure everything's grounded and fixated. But as Mercury squares Pluto, there's going to be this stubbornness to the way that we're thinking, and and the other thing I was thinking about with Mercury squaring Pluto is fixation. If Pluto is about like fear and it makes these small things really big and these big things really small, and Mercury squaring it, it's like we might be having this resistance to wanting to change some of our thoughts or our views and being very fixated on the dark. Like, have you ever had like sleep paralysis? Or I remember when I was a kid, I was really, really afraid of the dark, and I would like, need to go to the bathroom, and I would be scared because I would see like a shadow person in the corner and shit like that. And so I would be paralyzed. And that's how I think of Mercury squaring Pluto. And I think the goal on Monday is to recognize and have that self-awareness that you might be a little bit fixated on something. And that might be okay for that day because it's going to happen no matter what. But try not to dive too deep into it and understand like, hey, I'm just being fixated on this. It's going to pass, and you can't let it get to you too deeply. Then we get to Tuesday. And on Tuesday, the moon's then going to ingress into Sagittarius. It's going to trine Neptune. And then the moon is going to make a trine to Venus in Aries and Mars in Leo. I'm really looking forward to Tuesday because there's this freedom and fun feeling. I love when the moon leaves Scorpio and goes into Sagittarius. It's like we're done with the negative emotions. We are feeling free. We are feeling excited. And as it trines Neptune, I talked a little bit about this in the Saturn and Aries video, but with Neptune and Aries, and we're starting to idealize and romanticize what our actions are, and we're going to be more yang oriented. As Saturn goes into Aries, I think taking the action might be more difficult than we're imagining. And that's the whole point of like Neptune and Aries, right? Like we have this imagination of it. We have this mythos around it. But when Saturn goes in, actually putting the rubber to the road might be a little bit more difficult. And so as the moon goes into Sagittarius and trines Neptune, we have that feeling of, again, like, I can't wait to do this. I'm excited to do this. I'm visualizing myself doing this thing and running into this area. And what are my hopes and what are my dreams? And what is my point B? What am I aiming towards? But as the moon makes this trine to Venus and Mars, there's something really hot and like sexy about it. Like again, I'm all fire and air in my chart. So of course I'm going to like all the fire and air transits. But something I think a lot about with like the moon in Sag trining Venus and Aries and Mars and Leo is like being like hot and sweaty. And I know a lot of people get really like, it's super funny to me when people get weird about sweat because I really like sweat. Just the concept of being like really hot and your body is like trying to cool you off. And there's something, I don't know, like maybe I'm just weird about it. But when the moon is trining Venus with the moon in Sagittarius, there's this sort of fun, lighthearted, confident, sexy energy. And I think, you guys might be able to understand when, have you ever thought you were confident or that you were feeling good, and then you run into someone who their energy is just so passionate and so alive where you kind of go like, wow, no, that's confident. That's hot. They have this giving energy. Like, again, think about fire and think about energy in itself. You can feel fire from a distance. You can't really like feel earth from a distance. Does that make sense? And so on Tuesday, when the moon goes into Sag, I think there's just this really inspirational, fun, excited energy that we're going to be having. So I really hope that you enjoy Tuesday. And that blends into Wednesday because on Wednesday, the moon is going to be going opposite Jupiter, but the moon doesn't actually make that opposition to Jupiter until like the very, very late evening. So when you have a full day of the moon applying to Jupiter, there's going to be more and more excitement. But the issue is Jupiter is still in detriment. There's still this overwhelming feeling of all of the possibilities and all the opportunities. And like I said, if you haven't watched my Jupiter and Gemini video, I talked about it on Instagram and I shared it on there. And I talked about it last week, and I'm having a lot more people watch it again. Because I made a comment last week. I'm like, Jupiter and Gemini fucking sucks. And people were watching it like, dude, you were so right about it. It's so funny how Jupiter is about faith and hope and belief. And when it's in the sign of like being logical and rational, like it just doesn't work all that well. And so the moon in Sag wants to be more ideological. The moon in Sag wants to be more hopeful. but it's going to be coming face to face with this. Again, you're being too rational about it. You're being too logical about it. You're gaining too much information. Like there's just, again, because of the internet and everything, there's information overload a lot of the times. And there's times where information is really good. That will be important for the end of this month when we have like the Mercury Cazimi in Gemini and the new moon in Gemini. But I think as the moon goes opposite Jupiter, you're going to be wanting to do all these great things, but you're going to be overwhelmed with everything that there is to do, all of your options, whether or not you believe in it, because you're going to be like, I want to manifest this, but then you're leaning into the rational, logical part of things. So Wednesday is an oddball because there's this very fun and inspirational part of it. But then by the end of the evening, I think you're just going to be feeling a little bit overwhelmed. So don't be afraid to just kind of like have that fun feeling. And when it starts to get, too much anxiousness, like find a way to kind of calm yourself down, get back in your body rather than being super cerebral. And that brings us to Thursday, because on Thursday, the moon is then going to make a square to Saturn. Okay. The moon will then ingress into Capricorn and square Neptune, but we have our highlight of the day, which is Venus leaving shadow. So I want to cover the moon transits first before we get into Venus. And like I said, with the moon in Sagittarius, we're feeling like excited, adventurous. We want to know what our next destination is. The journey is the destination kind of a feeling. But as it squares Saturn, we have Saturn at the last degrees of Pisces. And as Saturn goes into Aries, like I want to be really real with you guys here. It is going to take more than you think. If Saturn is about discipline, it is going to be fallen. It does not do well in Aries because Saturn wants to take time doing things. And Aries is about doing it now. And you're going to get a big wake-up call of, hey, you might want to do this in a slow and steady way, but you need to figure it the fuck out right now. And I think as Saturn is leaving Pisces and the moon is squaring Saturn, you have an opportunity to go, okay, who do I have to be in order to move forward? Because again, Pisces is an internal dream part of us. It's the very yin, if Sagittarius is the yang part of our, ideology of our belief system of hope, Pisces is the internal. It's the sensitive. It's the who do you have to be on the inside in order to be that person? Again, it's like the space between, you can look at Pisces and Aries as the space between life and death. And as the moon squares Saturn, I think there's going to be this harsh stop of, okay, you can only go so far on the internal journey, but you need to be aware of what you are like what you're saying to yourself and how you're feeling on the inside and where you need to be more disciplined here. Because when Saturn leaves Pisces, there's only going to be the North Node in Pisces, which we haven't had nothing in Pisces in a very, very long time. And as Saturn goes into Aries, now it's going to be about like, okay, you're going to have instantaneous feedback of whether or not you are able to take the actions that you want to take. As the moon squares Saturn, there's just an opportunity for you to really look on the inside and say, okay, who do you have to be in order to move forward? Enough thinking about it. It's the difference between, I'm so grateful I grew up racing motocross. Because you're constantly facing fear. When you are out in the hills and you see a new jump, you have to take a risk at some point. And the second that you hesitate and the second that you become fearful of it, that's the second you lose. And there's a time to kind of go, okay, like I have to get out of my own head. I have to get into my body. And I think this moon in Sag squaring Saturn is that opportunity to really go, okay, a little bit too in my like head right now. I need to just go. But then the moon ingresses into Capricorn. And as the moon goes into Capricorn, again, like I always say, it's a great time to just get work done, to detach from your emotions, just to get things done rather than being emotional all the time. The moon will square Neptune though. And the thing that I was thinking about this is, with the moon and Capricorn squaring Neptune and Aries, is there's almost like this question of like, can you do that? Can you do the thing that you want to do? Because Neptune and Aries is going to make a lot more of what the actions that we need to take confusing. We're going to be questioning it. It's going to be almost like, and again, confusion is a defense mechanism. So many people go, oh, I'm confused of what I want to do with my life. It's like you're lying to yourself. You're not actually confused. You're just like trying to avoid the truth. You feel like the truth is not exact, like, it's too big. It calls you into a much more powerful state than you want to admit, and it's scary. So you act confused and you play small. Like confusion is just a way for you to avoid what you actually need to be doing. And I think as the moon squares Neptune, there's a really interesting vibe around like, okay, I have to detach from my emotions, but I'm going to be confused over what I have to do. Can I actually do this? Do I actually have the gall to get it done? And that feeling will pass. I think this is what's really fun about astrology is we can recognize when we may not feel all that good about something, but that feeling will pass because the moon will leave that aspect. Now, the moon will stay in Capricorn for the rest of the day, but our highlight of the day is Venus leaving shadow. I made a post about this on Instagram. I really want you to think about what has changed in your life in the house that Aries and Pisces rules. Because a lot of the Venus retrograde is about reevaluations. And now that Venus has left shadow, what are you pursuing? What do you want? It's Venus in detriment, right? It's not supposed to be like this super easy way. You have to take it. No one's going to give you permission. You have to give that to yourself to want what you want, to take what you want. Because if you're waiting for the world to give you permission, you're going to wait forever and you're going to die never having it. When are you going to give yourself permission to take the things that you want? When are you going to give yourself permission to do the things that, again, I think of Venus in Aries as like not classy. And this is something really important too. Like if you do any sort of social media content, like it's cringy at first. It's always funny to me when people get all like cringe, like people are like, oh, it's cringy to post. I'm like, what? Why do you have such an inflated ego? Like you can't humble yourself to maybe be a little foolish to like do the thing that you want. But as Venus leaves shadow, I think the more important thing is that whole phase, which has been a thing since January. Venus entered shadow in January. We're done with that now. Now we're moving on to new territory. And I think that's the important thing to recognize. We get to Friday, and on Friday, it's really interesting. The moon in Capricorn is going to make a square to Venus in Aries and trine Mercury at like the exact same time. So there's something not sexy about this, but like also very, very good in terms of like numbers and being grounded and communication. Like the thing I was thinking about was like, have you ever been in a good mood, like a flirty mood? You try to like kind of like just flirt or maybe go a little bit out there than normal and you don't get rejected, but someone is just not receiving it. And you're like, okay, like it doesn't really hurt your feelings, but you're like, okay, vibe has been checked. That's not the right move. That's the feeling. And it's kind of like, it reminds me of like there's a joke online. It's like put the fries in the bag. Like the moon in Capricorn trining Mercury and Taurus at the exact same time is like, look, you're not gonna get away with your funny joke. You're not going to be able to do the thing that's kind of fun. There's going to be some resistance to that, but the Mercury part of it. So the communication is clear. The paperwork gets signed. Everything is, all of your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted. It just may not be as, sexy or exciting as maybe you want it to be. And I think there's a level of like the moon is in detriment, Venus is in detriment. They're both squaring one another. So being able to navigate how you're supposed to feel and what you're and like, what you want to do and having fun will be difficult. But it's kind of like, maybe you're at a business meeting and you're trying to be a little bit more fun with, your client and they're just not having it, but they're there for business. So the deal will be done, but it wasn't really all that fun as you maybe wanted it to be. That's Friday's energy. So then we get to Saturday. And this week, we start the week off with the full moon in Scorpio, right? Purge, let it go, let it all die. And that's important because you're going to make room and clear things out for Saturday. Where Saturday, there is so much breakthrough energy. There is so much liberating energy and destabilizing energy in a really good way. Number one, the moon is going to make a trine to Uranus. At the exact same time, like literally on the same hour, the sun, our first highlight of the week, or our first highlight of Saturday, the sun conjoins Uranus. And then Mercury will square Mars as our second highlight. And then the moon later on in the evening will make a sextile to Saturn and go into Aquarius later on Saturday night. Okay, so Saturday is a lot to unpack because, okay, the sun is conjoining Uranus. When you talk about liberating energy, freedom, instability, like things being unexpected, that's what Saturday is all about. And what's interesting to me is the sun conjoining Uranus is always kind of like that liberating, instability, frenzy kind of energy. But the moon in Capricorn trines Uranus at the exact same time. That's a little like the thing I wrote down was like double trouble almost in a way of now you have the moon making an aspect to Uranus. Now this is a trine. So there's kind of like, I would argue that there is something about the unstable energy on Saturday being liberating and freeing and really good. But we do have Mercury making a square to Mars. Look, is it the worst transit ever? No. But because communication is so important in our world, I think it will be really frustrating. And the thing I wrote down was like, Mercury in Taurus squaring Mars in Leo is an immovable object meets an unstoppable force. Mercury in Taurus is fucking stubborn. Like it really is. And that's one of the great, like, I think it's funny when people make fun of Tauruses for being stubborn. It's like, that's one of their best aspects. Like, that's one of their greatest gifts, is being able to say, fucking no, I'm not doing anything. Like, I'm staying in my lane. But Mercury making the square to Mars is just going to be, you know, someone doesn't want to change their mind. And the Mars in Leo, the very confident fighter, the very passionate like energy of like, no, like I'm going to resist that, really comes out. And so there's going to be a lot of argumentative energy on Saturday. So if you are in a situation where you feel like you need to argue, or again, by the way, stop arguing with strangers online. I cannot believe how it is the weakest thing you could ever do. Like, when you are wasting your time trying to argue with someone online to prove a point, like you're going to change their fucking mind about something. It's just so, I cannot believe people waste their time doing that. Like, there's a lot of content creators I follow that like, they'll post like their negative comments. And by the way, like I'm guilty of this too. I'm not a perfect human being. Like, I'll get negative comments and it gets me frustrated, but I do my best to try to like, and it's very hard to like, not let it get to me, not read the negative comments, but I'll see social media creators like make like stories and and posts about these like negative comments, and it's not even related to their own content. It's related to other people's content. I'm like, why are you doing that? Like, why are you wasting your time trying to prove people wrong that don't give a shit either way? And so I say that because so many of you, I bet, probably do, like, you know, you might see a video and see a comment like, oh, I disagree with this, and, you know, get into an argument online. Try not to do that. If you're going to experience some sort of, you know, argumentative energy, some sort of verbal conflict, I think just Saturday is just verbal conflict's going to happen. Recognize that's probably going to happen. Do your best to just not let it spoil over into worse things, if that makes sense. Like, maybe you do need to say a few harsh words. Maybe you do need to let it roar a little bit, let it rip. But understand and know when you've said what you've needed to say, and you can move on from there, and don't let it get to you. Now, once we get to Saturday evening, Saturn's going to make the moon, while it's still in Capricorn, is going to make a sextile to Saturn, and then it will ingress into Aquarius. I think at the end of the night, there's just sort of this like detaching energy that we kind of get into if you're out on Saturday night. And then we get to Sunday, the moon will then conjoin Pluto, and the moon will then make a sextile to Venus and go opposite Mars. I think on Saturday night, there's the thing I was thinking about with the moon conjoining Pluto is like night terrors, almost in a way. Especially just because it happens so late at night. I would just be, you know, again, you're probably not going to experience much, but like, you know, for the rare people who are up late at night or, you know, have problems sleeping, I think Saturday night might be a little bit more difficult. But the moon earlier on in the morning is going to make a sextile to Venus. That's kind of cool. There's this like connecting with people in a weird way on Sunday morning. Maybe it's like brunch with the people that you went out with, and I don't know, you don't really like them, but it's fun to just be with people. But then the moon goes opposite Mars. Something I was thinking about was the moon in Aquarius sextiling Venus and Aries is like a group of haters. And I am such a hater, and I try not to be, but like, it's just one of those things. I fucking love being a hater sometimes. It's my guilty pleasure. And if you're like bonded with someone over your hate for something, that's what this reminds me of, especially because as the moon's in Aquarius going opposite Mars and Leo is just, it's easy to be a critic. It's easy to be a critic. And the moon in Aquarius going opposite Mars and Leo is like, their performance was shit, and they're stupid, and there's just this kind of like, you know, connecting with this audience on like hating whoever is taking up the light. And there's a level of connecting with people on a similar path. But one of the things I wrote for the moon going opposite Mars is like, not everyone can share the light. And I think what's really interesting is like, for example, people hate Leos because they're so egocentric. It's like, as a Leo, I love putting people on. I love giving as much light as I can to other people. And people are just like, well, Leo's the center of attention. It's like, well, it's my show. It's my, you know what I mean? Specifically here, it's my show. But I think a lot about how the moon going opposite Mars is this kind of like, a lot of people can have a lot of resistance to people putting themselves out there. And I think there's just kind of this frustrating like level of maybe seeing things that are happening and you being a background critic, you being the peanut gallery, you being, you know, just kind of like an overall hater. Now, after the moon goes opposite Mars, try to let that go. Have that as a fleeting moment. We get to next week, though. The sun's going to go into Gemini. We're in Gemini season already. 2025 is starting to kick up. Venus makes a trine to Mars. I'm loving the Venus-Mars trine. Oh my God, it's going to be so much fun. Mercury's going to conjoin Uranus. Again, more of a breakthrough, more instability kind of things. Saturn goes into Aries next week. We have a lot. Again, Saturn goes into Aries, Jupiter goes into Cancer in June, Uranus goes into Gemini. Like, we haven't even gotten to the big stuff yet. of this year. But Saturn goes into Aries next week and Mercury goes into Gemini next week. The end of May, the Gemini stuff going on is so good. I'm so looking forward to it. So like I said, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like, share, comment, let me know what's going on for you guys. I love and appreciate you so much, and I'll be seeing you next week.